Hello everyone, this is Naresh IAS Academy guiding platform for civil service exams. We have already uploaded a video in Hindi medium for the analysis of general studies paper 1, and now I am going to analyze the entire question paper in English. The UPSC have included mainly 3 subjects or 3 parts in general studies paper 1, and simply we have to understand what is the nature and the syllabus of this paper. Then this is a simple intro of paper 1, civil service mains exam. The general studies, if we have a complete approach about the syllabus, definitely it makes our preparation too easy. Hindi medium students can approach from our videos. The general studies paper 1 broadly includes the 3 sections. One is the history. The history further includes Indian history and some topic from the world history. But the weightage of world history is not too much. And the second subject is the society, there are some topics. Or third is the geography. Geography further divided into the Indian and the world geography. Mainly there is a comparative studies under the topics of geographies, so we will discuss in detail. The general studies paper 1 covers the 250 marks and the time allotted for the paper is 3 hours. And UPSC since the last 10 years have changed the question patterns. Mainly you have to answer most of the question in 150 words, 200 words or the 250 words, and number of questions, this is generally fixed. There are 20 questions in a paper. So this is the general information about the general studies paper 1. And now the one more things you must know, when we have to answer in 150 words, so how many minutes must be invest? So how much time should you take to write the answer in these words? So this is a general calculation. You have to write answer of 100 words in 4 minutes and answer of 150 words in 6 minutes, 200 words in the 8 minutes or 250 words in the 10 minutes. So this is the general information. You can also calculate this. The next is the part of the history. The first we will talk about the Indian history. Indian history, mainly UPSC have included only the 4 lines in the syllabus of Indian history. The line 1 says the development of art form, literature and architecture from the ancient times to the present time. This is the one line of the syllabus, and we can analyze this line in the different topics. One is the art forms. second is the literature, or third is the development of architecture. So how can we prepare these topics? If you are observing the previous year question paper, then definitely you can expand your mindset and your thought process, because those areas which were known as the untouchable, but UPSC have touched these topics or have asked so many questions from where. First, the art forms. Art forms mainly is a big topic, but here I will discuss only 3 or the 4 points from where the UPSC have asked generally questions. The art form first includes the sculptures or the statue art. In the development of sculpture from the ancient time, medieval or the present time. So from the ancient time we can trace, this is the Gandhar art. Gandhar art is the first most important part of the art form. You know, the Gandhar art was developed during the 1st or 2nd century under the Kushan age, when the Kanishka was ruler there. So Gandhar art have so many features, but mainly the UPSC have focused how much extent the Gandhar art have borrowed ethical values or main instinct from the Greek and Roman. You have to study this point, because 2 or 3 times simply the question I have asked from this information. And later on, during the Gupta age, when the Gandhar art was supplemented by the statue art of Hinduism, when the Hindu organization or temples started the construction of statues of the Hindu goddess or deities, mainly the 10 incarnation of Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, and so many statues of goddess Durga were constructed, and they are the representative of the sculptures in India. And now here you have to trace the different themes of these statues. One is the flute playing Krishna. The flute playing Krishna statue, what is the message of this? So then in the next video I will discuss in detail. Simply I am here guiding how you have to cover the topics. When we are studying simply from the notes, or we are taking help from any coachings, so where we have to be alert, the topics must be studied in those dimensions as the UPSC is required. The flute playing Krishna, what is the theme or message? And this is the Tandav dance of Lord Shiva. The Tandav dance of Lord Shiva and the incarnation of Ganga and the Ardhanarishwar form of the Lord Shiva. So then these themes have been taken from the Ellora and Elephanta. So simply you have not just studied the Ellora or Elephanta as they have written in the books. After studying, we have to make up mind to elaborate or explain these values as the UPSC required. And in the medieval phase, the temple architecture was continued, and till the present time it was continued flourished. But mainly the themes were developed in ancient time, in medieval or modern time. Simply they were enlarged, nothing was added as a new elements. So this is the one art form, the sculptures. Second is the paintings. You have to start these topics from the Bhimbetka painting, the first rock art, the rock paintings. What kind of values we have traced from the Bhimbetka, and then it was supplemented by the Ajanta paintings. And what are the features of Ajanta painting? When we compare Ajanta paintings with the Gandhar sculptures, so what the main differences are generally seen. However, this is the sculpture and this is the paintings, but at the theme, because the Gandhar sculpture also have subject type Buddhism as the Ajanta paintings, and Ajanta paintings what kind of message delivered that time and how this is alive today. Ajanta paintings, and throughout the ancient time different kinds of paintings were added in the Ajanta paintings, and during the medieval age Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who reigned during the 1605 to 1627, and the period of Jahangir is called the golden age, golden phase of the paintings. Why we are saying this was the highest climax or the culmination of paintings? So then we have to point out on what grounds we are saying this was the climax. So we have to compare the Mughal paintings with the Ajanta paintings, and this is the one important art forms, paintings. And third is the music. During the ancient time there was no significant development or flourishment in the music art. Simply we have found some evidences in the Samveda, and this was the Samudragupta, the Gupta rulers who have shown or depicting playing veena on the coins. But during the medieval age this was the Amir Khusro. So then you have to trace the significant points from the Amir Khusro. What was the contribution of Amir Khusro in the music art, and this was added or further enlarged by the Tanseh, the great musician in the court of Mughal emperor. What kind of styles in the music sectors were introduced by the Tanseh, then you have to point out here. And during the British phase, now the music entered in the new era and got the new horizontals from the when the Indian music contacted with the Western music, then there was a infusion, and so the basic instincts or the original instincts was lost. Music art form, and there are the three main art forms, and this is the literature, development of literature. How can we trace the development of literature from ancient to the present time? First, the Chinese literature. So many Chinese traveler visited India, faction to Hensang, and this was the Itsing and Mahuyan, and what kind of information they have mentioned in their text, and how are they helpful to rewrite or reconstruction of Indian history. So this is the question you have to understand here. What do you mean by the rewrite or the reconstruction of history on the basis of Chinese text? And so many the Greek texts, and what the Greek text says about the Indian society, geography, and how are they helpful for the history writing. And this is the Persian literature. Persian literature mainly starts during the medieval age when India was ruled by the Muslim rulers under the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughal emperors. And why it is said the Persian literature is considered the age of spirit. Age of spirit, what do you mean by age of spirit, and how the Persian literature differ from the Chinese, Greek and the Indian literature. So we have to understand the nature of Persian literature. And next, during the medieval age the literature was enlarged or diversified by the Bhakti and the Sufi movement. So this was the Bhakti movement, and how the Bhakti and Sufi movement expanded the horizontals of the literature, and what were the dimensions added by the Bhakti and Sufi saints. So you have to study this topic in detail. And one more things, that is so many rulers individually, for examples this was the Krishna Dev Rai of the Vijayanagar Empire, and what was the role of Krishna Dev Rai, how he promoted the growth and development of Telugu literature. However, he himself wrote a book Amukta Malyada in the Telugu. Then simply the individual monarchs and rulers, they played role in the development of literature. This was the Firoz Tughlaq who started the writing of autobiography, and further this was the Babur, the founder of Mughal Empire, who wrote Tujhke Babri or Babarnama, the best autobiography. And this was the Jahangir who also wrote his autobiography Tujhke Jahangiri. So then how can the autobiographies or biographies are helpful for the rewriting of histories? And during the Mughal Emperor Akbar, the literature got its climax, and the age of Akbar is called the golden phase of literature. So then why we are saying this was the golden phase of literature during the Mughal Emperor Akbar? So we have to study it in detail. On what grounds? Because UPSC is ready for asking a question in any time. And during the British phase or the modern phase, what kind of literature was introduced by the British official that time? So there are some aspects of the literature. Okay. One more thing, a question I have asked that Indian philosophies and tradition have influenced the different art forms and literature in India. This is absolutely right. The Indian philosophies, the so many philosophers have explained or revealed the mystics aspect of the human lives, and this was revealed through the paintings, sculptures and the temples, and also through the literature. So we can prove this, okay, this is definitely true, and we have to insert some important examples here. The development of architecture, here we can trace the important aspect of the stupas. What are the stupas? Then stupas mainly are the debris or remnants after the death of Gautam Buddha, and stupas how includes the local motifs and the ideals of Gautam Buddha, and are they comparable and are they compatible? The local motifs means what? And the Buddhist ideals. So this is the best infusion in the stupas. So many aspects of stupas, and what were the political or economic significance of the stupas. When you are completing this topic, then you should enlarge your dimensions. This is the temple architecture in the medieval age. The temple architecture started during the Gupta age. Why? To counter the development or growth of Buddhism under the Mahayana philosophy. And what are the different styles of temple architecture? This is the Nagar style in northern India, Dravid style in South India, and Vesar style in the central India. This was the fusion of Nagar and the Dravid, and there were some regional styles of temples. All the temple architecture styles are very important for the view of question paper. So when you are studying, when you are completing this topic, then you must focus here. And during the development of Dravid architecture, this is considered the phase of Chola Empire, the Chola rulers, where the temples architecture under the Dravid style got its climax. And we can say same things about the Nagar style temples during the Chandela rulers. Chandela rulers, they made Khajuraho as their capital now in Madhya Pradesh. So then how can we compare these both style, and why we are saying this was the culmination? So then we have to point out, we have to trace these points, because UPSC anytime make questions from here. And in the architecture we can trace the rock cut architecture. This is one more aspect, the rock cut architecture. You know, in India the first rock cut architecture is known, the Barabar and the Nagarjuni caves of Bihar. The Barabar caves started by the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka, and later on so many rock cut architecture started in India. This is the Badami caves under the Chalukyas of Badami, and this is the Rath temples. Rath temples under the Pallava rulers in Tamil Nadu. Narasimhavarman first who built the Rath temples at the Mahabalipuram. So then what are the main features of rock cut architecture? So you have to prepare these topics. Definitely questions have been asked and may ask in future. And next, under the architecture, the inscriptions, also we can say the edict inscription. We have to start this from the Asokas, and during the Gupta age most of inscriptions were inscribed. And what are the edict inscriptions and what are the journal inscription, what are the religious inscription, so many aspects of inscription, how inscriptions reveal the actual socio-economic political circumstances of that time. If you have some information, then you have to prove this. The question have been asked already. In the medieval age, the new architecture elements were introduced in India. This was the Indo-Islamic architecture, under which the construction of mosque, mausoleum, minarets and the public buildings and the highest gate like the Buland Darwaza, the tomb, the first tomb of India, this was the tomb of Nasruddin Mahmud, which is called the Sultan Gadi, built by the Iltutmish. During the medieval age, the architecture entered into the new phase and it reached that climax during the Mughal Emperor Shahjahan. The Shahjahan who built the Taj Mahal, construction of Delhi was by Shahjahan, and where he constructed the Red Fort. Then on what ground we are saying this was the climax of the architecture during the Shahjahan? So then you have to drive these points, okay. And during the British phase, two kinds of elements were added. First, the public buildings, also called the government buildings, made by the British governments like the Delhi Parliament, North Block, South Block, President House, Governor House, and they built so many construction at the hilly areas in the Jammu Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Arunachal Pradesh. Then what was the main purpose of construction of such kinds of buildings? During the British phase, the architecture was continued by adding some new elements. So you have to complete the first line of the topic in this way. In Indian history, the UPSC have mentioned important incidents or development of incidents from the middle of 18th century. So this is the middle of 18th century. We can trace this from the history after the 1750, middle of the 18th century. In this topic, what must be studied or read? One is the position of East India Company. Second, the fragmented polity, disintegration, fragmented polity, and India was under the different political powers. Third is the foreign invasion, and in which this is the Battle of Panipat third. Battle of Panipat third, 1761. And the British policies, different kinds of policies and their consequences or impact of the British policy. These are the subtopics we can derive from this line. From the middle of 18th century, so now the East India Company, which was mainly a trading company or commercial company, now became a political power, because company got victory in Battle of Plassey 1757. Then company again fought the Battle of Buxar in 1764. Now after conquering these two battles, company established itself as an important political or the military power in India. So after that, now company targeted the other political powers of India. So then East India Company targeted the different political power. This was the Marathas. They were defeated by the East India Company. So then you have to study in detail the Anglo-Maratha wars. And second, this was the Punjab state, where the East India Company defeated the Maharaja Ranjit Singh and his legal heirs. The Mysore state, where East India Company defeated the Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. So then what were the causes or consequences of Anglo-Mysore wars? And the other local powers defeated by the East India Company. The age of middle of 18th century is generally called, this was a time of fragmented polity, because there was no one monarch who ruled over the entire India. There were so many political powers, political players, and they were every time quarrel to each other, and they have enmity to each other. So there was no unity in India. The fragmented polity, we have to prove this. The Mughal Empire till the middle of 18th century, it was too weak, could not face the East India Company or the other foreign powers. So then what were the main causes or reasons for weakening the Mughal Empire? The Mughal Empire, which was a pillars of India, now it was entering into the declining phase. So many aspects we have to study about the declining Mughal Empire. Second, the Marathas. There was a Maratha Empire organized by the Chhatrapati Shivaji, but after the Shivaji, why the Marathas weakened and they declined? When Peshwas started their rule, Peshwa got the power from the Chhatrapatis. Then they led the Maratha Empire and they stood Maratha Empire before the British Company. And why they defeated, or East India Company defeated the Marathas in 3 Anglo-Maratha wars. The 3 Anglo-Maratha war, you have to detailed study different causes, natures of this war, and finally the Maratha Empire was ended and the Maratha territory was merged into the Bombay Presidency, and it was named as the Bombay Presidency, where a British governor was appointed for the rule. So Maratha power, second, and this is the third, the Punjab state, where the Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who integrated the Sikh community and stood the Maratha Empire. But finally they surrender before the East India Company. Why the East India Company target the Maratha Punjab states, and how the Punjab state was merged into the British Empire? So many aspects you have to study why company targeted this, the Punjab states. And this was the Mysore states. Mysore originally was founded by the Vodiyar dynasty, the Hindu rulers, but after the middle of 18th century or 1750, in 1761, Hyder Ali acquired the Mysore states and declared himself as Sultan, and then his son Tipu Sultan ruled there. Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan both were too much ambitious. That's why the East India Company had to fight against them, and finally company defeated both Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan and acquired their Mysore states and merged into the Madras province. And you have to detail study the Anglo-Mysore wars, and there was the province of Bengal province. Initially Bengal was an important province or Suba of the Mughals, but when the Mughal Empire was weakened declined, so then Bengal province declared itself as an independent state, and this was the Murshid Quli Khan who declared himself independent Nawab, and till the 1750 Bengal established the independent states. However, there was a symbolic relationship between the Mughal emperor and the Bengal province, and East India Company targeted the Bengal province because Bengal were the states who first intervened in the matters of East India Company. That is why company had to fight Battle of Plassey, where they defeated the Nawab of Bengal's Rajaddwala. Again they defeated the Nawab of Bengal in the Battle of Buxar. So definitely we can prove this. This was the age of fragmented polity. This was the disintegration of India. There were so many political powers and they were not united. That's why East India Company targeted one by one and defeated them. So then you have to study this topic in this way. And third is the foreign invasions. When India was running under the small political powers or the fragmented polity, definitely it was a great opportunity for the foreign invaders. And this was the Nadir Shah, who attacked over India in 1739, and after the Nadir Shah, the ruler of Persia, this was the Ahmad Shah Abdali, who challenged the Maratha powers in India, and finally Maratha had to fight Battle of Panipat III in 1761 against the Ahmad Shah Abdali. Ahmad Shah Abdali defeated the Marathas. There were long lasting impacts of this battle. The battle ended the possibility of Maratha to be a next ruling party over the India after the Mughals, and the battle settled the new equation in India. So then you have to study the Battle of Panipat III in the different dimensions, because UPSC have asked so many questions. So then what were the causes why the Maratha was defeated? This is another aspect. Policies of British government. When the East India Company established itself as political power along with the merchant or the commercial company. So now company introduced so many policies, the education policies of the British companies, the newspaper policies, economic policies, under which they introduced the agriculture policy, industrial policies, construction policy. In the agriculture policy, they introduced three kinds of land tenure system: zamindari system or permanent settlement in Bengal province. What were the main implications of this system? Mahalwadi system in the central India and Rayatwadi system in Madras and Bombay presidency. So then this is a big topic. The agriculture policies, what were the main motives of agriculture policy, how this was implemented and what kinds of impact were created, and why the peasants and tribesmen started revolt against the East India Company. This was simply a consequence of agriculture policy, or there were some other hidden causes. So we have to find out this. Industrial policies, how East India Company converted India as their British colony, and what kind of strategies or mechanism was followed by the East India Company, and India underwent into the British colonial system through the three phases. The phase 1, the mercantile phase, then age of industrialization, then financial capitalism, free trade policies. So different kinds of policies they introduced. So then you should read or study in details these policies, because this is a very important question, ki how India, which was a independent country, converted into a British colony. So then next, the British policies of the admin policies, where they started the new patterns of judicial systems, they introduced the new revenue system and the government offices, so many decisions introduced by the British government. And finally we have to find out the impacts of these policies. Definitely all the policies benefited the British government, and the most of Indian classes were adversely affected. That's why they revolt against the British government. So different classes they may be the peasants, tribesmen, in some area landlords, and the princely states and traders or the armies. They revolt against the British policies, and finally this was resulted into the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 is a landmark in Indian history. What were the main causes of revolt of 1857? So there were so many causes: social factors, economic, political, cultural, and the policies of Lord Balliol, subsidiary alliance system, and the doctrine of lapse of Lord Dalhousie, and the expansionist policy of Lord Canning. The multiple causes are responsible for this, and mainly the nature of the 1857 revolt. What was the nature? British scholars or the imperial scholars are committed to declare this was simply a sepoy mutiny and unrest of the peasants and tribesmen. And on the other hand, Indian historians are committed to prove this was a freedom struggle, national movement. This was a revolt of throughout the country, and this was the refusal or denial of the British policies, and the Indians peoples lost their confidence or belief in the British systems. So there is a clash between the Indian and the British historian. So very carefully you have to prepare this question, the nature of 1857 revolt, and final aspect, what were the consequences of 1857 revolt. After the revolt, East India Company was ended, and now the British Crown Victoria acquired the Indian administration in her hand, and she assured Indians for the better government, and they started some of the new policies. However, main instincts were not given up, and on the other hand, now Indians started the new chapter or the new role in the Indian history, and now they started to form their political organization, and finally this was resulted into the foundation of Indian National Congress. So then the topic, when you are preparing this topic, so you have to cover the different aspect like the causes. Question may be asked from the single cause, how the social cause was responsible for the 1857 revolt. However, it is not absolutely correct, but we have to focus over the social cause, and we have to account the other causes too, but the question is asked about the social cause, so you have to weightage 80% about the social cause and the nature or finally the consequences. Okay, the next is the various stages of the freedom struggle or the national movement. This is the third line of the syllabus. Freedom struggle or the national movement. There are the different stages of the freedom struggle or the national movement. First, you have to study the foundation of Congress. Why the Congress was founded, what were the main principles, main theories of the Congress, and the social ways of Congress. Initially, Congress was considered a group of the elite class or the higher class. Common peoples were not the part of the Congress, but over the time it got the nationwide nature. When the common people became the part of the Indian National Congress, the so many aspects you have to cover the Congress, and under the Congress the freedom struggle was started, then the national movement was started, and simply the rise of nationalism. Definitely we can say the nationalism systematically started by the Congress, because now Congress started to raise the questions of Indian peoples. And what were the demand or question of Indian peoples? They were collectively raised by the Congress before the British government. So this was the beginning of nationalism. So what do you mean by the concept nationalism? It was infused by the British policies, or before the Britishers, Indians were acknowledged and they were very well known about the concept of nationalism. So, you have to cover this topic. And under the Congress, the freedom struggle was led by the first, the moderate leaders, moderates also called the Narampanthi, during the 1885 to 1905. This is the moderate phase. What do you mean by moderate phase? What were the main demands of the moderates, and why the moderates were failed in the Indian politics? Why the British government did not give too much weightage for accepting their demands? So, different aspects of the moderate politics and what was their success in the Indian politics, we have to point out some aspect of this. Second, the moderates were replaced by or expelled by the extremists or the Garampanthi. The rise of extremist movement. With the rise of extremist movement, this was the revolutionary movement too. Revolutionaries are known as the more aggressive form of the extremists. Who were the revolutionaries and what were their main demands, their organization, how they implement their ideology among the Indian peoples, and what was the reaction approach of Indian peoples towards the revolutionaries, and why the revolutionary movement ended very soon, how the British government react against the revolutionaries, the different aspects about the revolutionaries and extremists, what the new things infused by the extremists in the freedom struggles, and how they presented themselves as a better alternate than the moderates. Then the phase of extremists you have to study it in detail. And when Gandhiji joined the freedom struggle, what the new elements were added in the freedom struggles and their ideologies, their implementation, their organization. So, this was the third page. So, then you have to cover this topic in this way. First, the nature or approach of freedom struggle in the 1920s, decade of 1920s, after the 1930s and the 1940s. This is the way of asking question by UPSC when you are covering this topic. And what were the new strategies of Gandhiji, the new elements, Satyagraha. What do you mean by Satyagraha? What are the main elements of Satyagraha? Who was eligible for Satyagraha according to Gandhiji or not eligible, and how the tactics of Satyagraha counter all the ideologies of freedom struggles, and finally how Gandhiji got succeed and the India got independence. Along with, you have to study the communalism in India, the rise of Muslim League after 1906, and how the Muslim League defended itself, and sometimes they got cooperation from the Congress and the British government, and finally they succeed to fulfill their objects and demand, and India was partitioned and Pakistan became the independent country. It was a good politics, was a well planned ideas of the Muslim leaders, or it was a failure of British government or the Congress leader. So, so many aspects about the communal politics. Okay, so this is the next part, and in this part one more things you must know, the role of different leaders. What was the role of Gandhiji on the different grounds, social, economic, political, and the role of Bhimrao Ambedkar, role of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and the role of Vallabhbhai Patel, role of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, role of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The important leaders you must complete the different aspect of their life or their ideologies and the strategies followed by the British authorities like the governors or governor general. Lord Wellesley introduced the subsidiary alliance system in India. What were the main implications of subsidiary alliance system? And this was the Lord Dalhousie who introduced the doctrine of lapse. The doctrine of lapse was the next step of subsidiary alliance. The doctrine of lapse, how annoyed the Indian princely states and what were their reactions, and the Lord Canning's or last the Lord Bebel's. What was the approach of Lord Bebel? In the last, how the Lord Bebel tried to balance the Congress and Muslim League, and he was not succeed. When the Clement Attlee replaced the Churchill in England, then he ordered to Lord Bebel, and the Clement Attlee did not provide discretionary power to Lord Bebel. So finally, the approach of the different officials you must know. The next topic, India after independence. In this topic, it I have written by UPSC. After independence, the consolidation or reorganization of India. Consolidation and the reorganization. Consolidation and the reorganization of India. In the consolidation, first we have understand the new administration introduced by the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and this strengthened the India from the inner side and from the outer side. Now India started its foreign policy with the Pakistan, China, Tibet, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Maldives and the different countries, and India's relationship with Nepal, Bhutan, China, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So with the Pakistan, what were the main causes of Indo-Pak wars? What was the Tashkent Agreement 1966, the Simla Agreement 1972, Indo-Sino War 1962, and what were the main consequences of the Indo-China war, and what changes have been seen or made the war over the Indian politics or the Indian scenario. Sri Lanka, what is the approach of India about the Sri Lanka, and what kind of steps have been taken by the government of India for the consolidation of their foreign front, and so many other steps like the for the economic consolidation. We have started the 5-year plannings. Then 5-year planning started for the socio-economic consolidation and the well established economic policy under with the industrial policy. And after the 1991, and this was the India adopted the liberalism and they started the economic reforms, and now Indian economy have attached with the global economy, and through which Indian economy have consolidated, and now we are running with the global economies. And in the other sectors we can say the Indian government have taken so many issues. We have founded so many national organization, statutory organization for the consolidation. We have started a nationwide education system, health system and the welfare schemes for the vulnerable section or the weaker section. So many steps we have taken for the consolidate the India from the inner side. The reorganization of India, in which after the independence this was the political reorganization, and this is also called the integration. There were the about 562 princely states, how they were integrated, and this was the Vallabhbhai Patel and his policies to integrate these princely states with the rest of India. And what were the strategies followed by the Vallabhbhai Patel? In this strategy there were two main aspects. One was the standstill agreement or the instrument of accession. Standstill agreement and instrument accession, and you have to study the relationship between them. So then integration. Second, there was a demand of new states in India and how it was satisfied over the time. The formation of new states not only simply on the basis of language. The other aspects, cultural, political, economic, have been considered with this. So, there is no debate over the formation of new states in India. We have reorganized this system, and again the cultural diversity, for the maintaining or integration of this cultural diversity, Government of India have passed so many acts, have made so many laws through which all the minority classes have given sufficient liberty or freedom for their development, and they have arranged with the nation's unity and integration. So, then this topic you must know under these subtopics. So, this is the syllabus of Indian history mentioned by UPSC in the paper 1. Some topics from the world history are the part of history syllabus, and the UPSC have mentioned these topics in world history. Important incidents from the mid of 18th century, mainly this line have been used by the UPSC. So, we can trace the important events like first the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution, an important topic and foundation of the whole world history. Then the American Revolution, American Revolution 1776, then the French Revolution, Russian Revolution 1917, French Revolution in 1789, and World Wars, First World War and the Second World War, and last is the colonization and the decolonization. So, these are the topics have been mentioned: colonization and decolonization. Okay. Then how to cover or how to prepare these topics so that we can solve all the questions have been asked or are about to may ask in future. The Industrial Revolution is an important topics. Then first thing you must know the nature of Industrial Revolution. Since the 1750, so then the first Industrial Revolution took place in England. So then you have to find out the important reasons why it started from the England, then other parts of the European continent, and it was started after some time in Japan. And what were the factors they led the Industrial Revolution in Japan, and what was the difference between the nature of Industrial Revolution in the European continent and Japan. So, this is most important. Second, what kind of consequences were created by the Industrial Revolution? This was first, after the revolution, a capitalist class, industrialist class emerged in the economy, and it not only affected the economic activities, but they acquired all the spheres of human life. So, this was the direct consequence, rise of the capitalism. Okay. So, capitalism further led the different kinds of invention, discoveries, and they started the race in the world, and the Industrial Revolution provided ready-made goods at large scale and created demand for the raw materials. Definitely for the Industrial Revolution, a colonization process was started, because initially this was the concept for colonization, how to collect raw material to run their industries or factories in England and Europe. And when the factories prepared of excess ready-made goods and it was sold in the remote areas, and for this they established their colonies and settlements there, and finally this was resulted into the colonization. So the far-reaching impact of industrial revolution you have to study. This is more important topic. American Revolution 1776. What were the main reasons of American Revolution? In what circumstances England made the America as their colony, and how the America got independence from the suzerainty of Britain, and why the Americans revolt against the British systems. Simply it was a economic revolt, or there were the ideological clash, and how much extent the American Revolution leave impact over the global economies. And then the French Revolution 1789. French Revolution, what were the main circumstances of French Revolution? Did French Revolution get all the possibilities for which they started the revolution? Why the Napoleon Bonaparte diverted the main objectives of the revolution, and what kind of challenges had to face the French peoples during the Napoleon Bonaparte? And can we say the American Revolution and French Revolution both laid the foundation for modern world? Definitely we can say they provided a background on which the global economy or the global ideologies were developed. For example, American Revolution provided the ideological concept or the democratic concept of the written constitution in the world and the systematic admin structures, and the French Revolution provided the economic aspect, and the economic resources should be distributed among all the peoples, and they mainly emphasize to break down the monopoly of the specific class over the resources. So we can say the American Revolution provided political or ideological basis for the modern world, while the American Revolution provided along with the political ideas mainly the economic basis, and these are the two main pillars for the global economy. So we can prove this. And this is the Russian Revolution 1917. The impacts of Russian Revolution. After the Russian Revolution, the rise of communism. And what do you mean by communism? And later on how the communism stood itself against the capitalism. So capitalism was the direct consequence of industrial revolution, while the communism was the direct consequence of Russian Revolution. And finally they start to fight each other, and they led the world in the wave of Cold War, and later on so many positive or negative consequences were left over the global economies, and we have to trace these points. The Russian Revolution is considered a landmark in the world history because they first put a challenge before the capitalist economy. And there is another topic, the world wars. World War I 1914 to 1918, World War II 1939 to 1945. How the World War II was different than the World War I? On what grounds, circumstances? Then when we are preparing this topic, so definitely we must focus these areas. And the Second World War was led by the Treaty of Versailles or the ambitions of Hitler. Do you agree with this? Or there was a hidden ideas of the conqueror of the First World War like the France, Britain and America, and they finally pushed the world in the waves of Second World War. And what were the consequences of World War I? The world during the World War I and World War II, and finally the Second World War not only devastate the global economies or whole the cultural systems, also they created the new foundation like the United Nations Organization, World Bank, IMF and the Third World, and they started the non-aligned movement, the name movements. And on the other hand, we can see the world was involved in an ideological war which is called the Cold War, and the political organization like the NATO and the Warsaw Pact were organized, and how the Russia made USSR and how could Russia challenge to the America or their capitalist ideology. So many aspects we must study and we must complete in this topic. Finally, this is the colonization and the decolonization. There are two or sometimes three stages of the colonization. In the different phases, colonization was started. Colonization is a process which was started just after the Industrial Revolution. So this was the stage 1 or phase 1 of the colonization. Through the colonization, they first started to settle their colonies or the trading posts, and finally they were used these posts for the collection of raw material and the sellings of ready-made goods. And later on, this pattern was changed. They finally settled there and they started to fight with the local rulers and defeated them and acquired the political power and became the mainstream political powers in these countries. This was the second wave. And third, sometimes what kind of policies they introduced there. So this was the third kinds of colonization. So why the European companies or European countries led the colonization, and how they covered most of the part of the world through the colonization. During the colonization, how they shifted the labor class or the human population from the one country to the another country. For example, India was colonized by the Britain, China was colonized by Britain and the other European countries. Malaysia, this is the Malaya Peninsula, colonized by the British. Indochina was a colony of French. This was the African continent, which was also colonized by the America, Britain, France, Denmark and the Holland and Spain. So this was the pattern of the nature of colonization. Most of Asia and Africa continent was the colony of the Britishers or other European countries. So when they shifted the human population from one country to the another country, and this concept is called the indentured labor. When these peoples were settled there, so then they lost their local identity or cultural values, or they spread their values in these countries, and where they stood new cultural ideologies, and finally they became the important cultural sectors or just like their parent countries. And when the peoples of these colonies were not agreed to afford the colonial power for a long, so then they started to freed themselves from this colonial power, and this is called the decolonization. Anyhow, these countries rejected the dominion of this colonial power, and finally they decided to get rid of them, and for this they started socio-economic political movements there. Then in India there is a series of different incidents in the freedom struggle, also called the national movement. In Africa, where the Nelson Mandela and the other leaders started their freedom struggle. In China, they had to fight against the Britishers or the other European company. In Indochina, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, they had to fight against the France. The Malay Peninsula also had to fight against the Britain. So then how they got independence from the colonial power? So then you have to study or read in deeply the various factors of the decolonization, and finally the colonial powers were pushed them. So this is the syllabus of world history in this topic. So then definitely you can understand the in what way we have to prepare these topics. So then you must study the previous year question papers, what kind of questions have been asked by UPSC, so that you must change your mindset according to the question paper and study these topics according to and what is the requirement of UPSC. The next is the social sector. This is the second part in paper 1, the social sector. There are some topics have been included from this sector. Mainly there are the 4 topics: the Indian society and the diversity of India. Second is the women's role and the women's organization, and here there are some other topic like the poverty, new concept of poverty, the population and urbanization. Okay. The third topic is impact of globalization on Indian society. Globalization impact we can trace on the different aspects. Or last is the different ideologies, just like regionalism, communalism, regionalism, communalism and the other aspects. Let us start social sector. First, the salient features of Indian society. In this topic, first you have to learn the traditional aspect or features of Indian society. Indian society based upon the Varna system, caste system and the new tendencies we are seeing. The society is grasping the class system. But in the modern time, we are expecting India as a classless society or casteless society. Can it be possible? And on what grounds we are expecting such kinds of natures of the society? Okay. And the position of women's within the Indian society under the different religions. Women's right as compared to his counterpart, the men or the male dominant society, and the new changes in the Indian society or challenges are standing before the Indian society, like the female foeticide, crimes against the women's, just for example the domestic violence against the women's, and what kind of steps have been taken to restrict, to save the women from the domestic violence. The government of India had made act, and the extra or the advanced features just like the homosexual marriage, live-in relationship, transgender issues. So these are the some aspects of Indian society. Then you have to cover all the dimensions. Another aspect of Indian society is diversity of India. Definitely from the very beginning, India is most diversified country in the world, and there are maximum religion and cultural groups resides in India at a time altogether. On the one hand, we are seeing all the cultural groups are trying to maintaining their local identities, and on the other hand, their cultural identity is eroding due to the domestic, internal or the outer factors. So we have to point out these factors, how they are affecting the cultural diversity. And another is, now India is a part of globalization, or we are running with the era of globalization. So what kind of values from the global economies are entering in Indian society, and are we losing our local identity or trying to be a part of the global economy? So can it be a right decision? And we can say the another aspect of this, we should be a global person and we should communicate with the global peoples along with the local identity. We never lose our local identity, because this is our ways, this is our philosophy, our darshan and the traditions. So these aspects now are discussing Indian society. You must know roles of women's and the women's organization. Roles of women's in which areas from the conventional time till the present time. The women's role in the Panchayati Raj systems. Governments have granted reservation for women's in Panchayati Raj system, village panchayats and the upper layers of the panchayats and the urban local bodies, and what kinds of impacts have left these systems over the conditions of the women's. Have they empowered through this? So you have to cover this topic as a whole. Second, the role of women in Indian politics. What kind of role we expect from women's, and the role of Indian administration, role of Indian women in Indian army, or women's as a entrepreneurs in Indian economy. How many women's are leading the economic activities in Indian economies, and can we expect women's must be a mother at a time along with the entrepreneur or a political leader, and how can it be possible? So we expect from women she should play a multidimensional role at a time. So we must always consider this aspect. And the women's organization, mainly there are different women's organizations are working for the empowerment of women's, but here this is the most important organization leading the feminist movement. So then what are the main approach or objectives of the feminist movement, and what kind of issues have been put by the feminist movement at the global level and in India? Are the feminist groups are raising same issues which are put forward before the western countries? So then feminist movements direction we have to consider here. And this is the concept of poverty. Poverty, now India have left the calorie intake formula and we have replaced the calorie formula by the multi-poverty index, also called the multi-dimensional poverty index, the MPI, since the 2009, and this formula, this parameter is according to the global indexes. And to what extent India have succeeded for the eradication of poverty? Have India failed to analyze or understand the nature of poverty in our country, and what should be the new approach or aspect for the alleviation of poverty, and can it be possible through the government's efforts only, or we should incorporate the private sector and the other civil societies? So it is a important topics, the poverty. Population, large population and the small population is a debate. India is the second largest population country in the world after China, but in future we will exceed the China very soon. And in India the size of large population is considered sometimes the demographic dividend, or sometimes the excess burden over the resources. Definitely we have to decide the direction if we are considering this, excess burden over the resources, definitely we are pushing our country in a wrong direction. And if we are making a plan or a strategy for the investment of working class or maximum part of population in the economic activities, definitely we can get the dividend. So the topics of population must be covered in the different dimensions. And should India initiate immediately the family planning or the population control scheme immediately, one child policy, how much extent be suitable for India? Urbanization. The conventionally there are the two approach of urbanization, the horizontal urbanization or the vertical urbanization. But now both approach of urbanization have become a challenge for the human lives. They are creating different kinds of challenges, and how can be overcome, and what should be the best strategy for the urban expansion. Should the government, all the countries start mass urban transport, and we should build the smart cities, and what are the main components of smart cities? Can India fight all the challenges of urbanization through the smart city programs? Then this topic must be prepared or covered in the different direction. Impact of globalization on Indian society. How much extent the globalization have left impact over the Indian society? One is the impact on family system. India was mainly a society of joint families, but now we are seeing the joint families are breaking, and we are pushing our society towards the nuclear families. Definitely in the foreign culture or the western countries there is a concept of nuclear families, and we are adopting in India. So this is a negative aspect. Second, the position of women's. We are presenting women's as a commodity as in the western world. However, in western countries women's have empowered, they are enjoying different kinds of political, economic, social, religious, cultural rights. But where the women's are presented just like a commodity or things. In India we are doing the same. So this is not justiciable. Definitely we must have respect the women's, and the appropriate role for the women should be according to the Indian philosophies, Indian culture and its value systems. Impacts over the old age peoples. Old age peoples are suffering too much in the globalization, because globalization have created dreams before the society or each or individuals to earn the maximum money or revenues, and for which they are leaving their families, they are undermining, neglecting the old age people, so they are suffering too much. Impact over the girl's child or the women's. Human trafficking now is a reality of this globalization in India. The human trafficking is increasing. And last, the slums areas. Globalization have increased the size, volume and mass of the slums areas, or the value system is a part of globalization. If we are trying to accepting or adopting all the global values on the cost of leaving our the local values or the parent values, so it is not a justful society. Definitely we must consider this. Last, the some topic like the regionalism, communalism, capitalism and communism. Secularism also. The secularism. Regionalism is an ideology or concept in which a local community or region want to maintain their identity along with the nationality. So the regionalism must be maintained according to the along with the nationalism or national integrity. The regionalism never try to exceed or overlap the nationality. But in India we are seeing for the regional or local values we are challenging the national identity. So we have to consider or find out what are the factors they are giving weightage or promoting the regionalism over the nationalism. Second, communalism. However, now we are entering in 21st century and we have discovered so many things, or we have invented invisible part of the world. But being a well established society and most of person have the excellent level of literature and the knowledge, but along with we are maintaining a communal rights, communalism. So this is not appropriate with our ideology. If we are making ourselves a very talented or highly intellectual society, so definitely there should be no scope for the communalism. But in the present time we are seeing in Indian society, this is also creating or developing along with the intellectual society. So we have to compare this. Secularism, there are so many aspects of secularism, but according to constitution the state's government must be a secular, and it means there is no state religion. Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, there is only one religion of the state to serve their people in the best manner. Then the center union government or all the state government to treat their peoples irrespective of their caste, religion or communities, simply they are the citizen or peoples. And in recently what kinds of new challenges have been created from the front of secularism in India? Capitalism and communism, the rise of capitalism after the 18th century, or this is the direct consequence of the industrial revolution, and communism is a consequence of Russian revolution. So what are the main aspects of communism and the capitalism? Then in the capitalist ideology, mainly the capitalist class is given absolute liberty, state played a minimum role, but in communism or socialism state is the sole instructor, where the industrial class or capitalist class have the least liberty and they have to work under the state's regulation. So this is the ideological clash, and both ideologies have their positive or negative aspect, and you should prepare this topic in the different ways. So these are the topics from the society. Okay. Next topic from the geography. Topics from the geography, it includes the geography of India and world. So then we have to compare, there are the three main topics in the geography: India and world. The topic must be covered in the context of Indian or the world geography. Okay. The topic one is the natural resources. So what kind of questions have been asked by UPSC and how to prepare this topic, natural resources. Second is the localization of industries. Localization of industry. And third is the geographical features. Geographical features. UPSC simply mentioned some symbols, but we have to analyze this. The natural resources, the distribution of natural resources in India as well as the world, and the distribution of these resources is not appropriate. How to make this distribution justful, so that each and individuals of the society can get benefits for their life. In this topic, we must read about the land, second the forest, third is the water, mainly the fresh water or saline water, fourth is the energy. Four important part. Land. In the land natural resource, we have to consider the land part, agricultural land or the non-agricultural land compared to their population. In India, we have a large size of population. So, how much land for the agriculture or economic activities we must have as a reserve land, and is India managing their land resources in a best manner or we are lacking? So, what is the policies of union or state government about the land resource management? You should complete this topic in this way. Forest, how the forests are affecting climatic structure. Importance of forest for the climatic point of view, mainly in India, when we are losing the forest cover area according to the national or international standards, according to which the 33% of geographical part must be under the forest cover, but in India it is about 20 to 22%. So, in India, what kind of policies we are making or improving the forest cover, and what kind of challenges India is facing in presently due to the low forest cover. And the land or forest management, this is the another topic. How can we manage these natural resources, and at the global level, in the America, Europe, Russia, African continent, what kind of challenges these countries are facing due to their mismanagement of land resource or the forest resource. So, you must study this topic in this way. Water, the fresh water or saline water. In Indian context, India has sufficient fresh water or not? First you should find, and third, if India has fresh water according to their large size of population, so then why we are facing the crisis of fresh water in the different areas of the countries? Is simply a mismanagement or the other hidden cause or reasons which are not identified by the government? And through the water resource, Government of India have started so many hydroelectric power projects, run of the river projects. What are the run of the river projects? Should India build big dams, or the concept of big dams should be leave and we should focus over the run of the river project? So, this question have been asked. So, how India is managing their water resource which is available in glaciers, rivers, lakes, and the saline water? What technology have evolved for the utilization of saline water, the sea water? And energy, the whole world is depending on mainly the conventional energy source, the fossil fuel, but it have proved, it have studied, the fossil fuels are not durable, and definitely one day we have to leave these fossil fuel resources. So, we have to move the renewable sources. Then the renewable sources are the solar, wind, and the nuclear energy. In Indian context, what are the potential of solar energy, and is India moving to adopt the solar technology, and what are the potentials or possibility of utilizing the wind energy and to convert this for the socio-economic development, and what steps have been taken by the government for the wind power management. Nuclear energy, recently it has seen India is taking too much interest in the nuclear energy programs. However, India has a limited source of uranium resources, and such kinds of uranium 235 which is used for the power generation, India has no uranium 235. So, why India is moving toward the nuclear energy sectors? India is not safe country for this, because internally we are facing so many challenges from the terrorist or the Naxalite or the internal disturbances. So, to operate the nuclear reactors, it may be a great threat in future. So, then why India is emphasizing, focusing over the nuclear energy programs, and how much extent and what results or benefits have been get by India since the 1950 through their nuclear energy programs. So, natural resources you must study in this way. Localization of industries, the localization of industries in primary sectors, secondary or the tertiary sector. You know, the primary sectors industries are localized or settled very close to the source of raw materials. Secondary industries may be established in the remote areas from very distance to the raw materials, source of raw materials, and this is the tertiary sector. Tertiary sectors which not depend on the source of raw materials. So, one important information is, recently it has seen throughout the world, most of industries in secondary and tertiary sector are settling in the remote area, and they are very distant from the raw material source. So, what factors have made the localization of these industries successful? So, we have to trace these points. And in India, what is the pattern of localization of the primary, secondary, tertiary sectors industries? And recently there is shifting from the north to south India, south to north India. For example, the sugar industry. North India was a center of sugar industry, but now it is shifting toward the south India. Then why? IT sector or the tertiary sector basically based in the south India, but now it is entering into the north India. So, then we have to find the main cause of this. Automobile sector, pharmaceutical sector, transport, communication, banking, financial, insurance. So, these sectors are not depending over the raw materials. So, then what are the factors they are making successful localization of these industries? Iron and steels industries, cotton textile industries, coal industries, power industries, and what are the possible factors of the localization of these industries? One more sector which have evolved in the world, this is the quaternary sector. Quaternary sector, also called the knowledge based economy. Now it has become an important part not only in India but throughout the world. Knowledge based economy, in which through the knowledge we are making ourselves, we are standing ourselves as a best or successful entrepreneur, and we are selling so many value added services or earning the too much money through the consultancy services, legal services, education services, health services, advisory services. So many services we are providing, and the IT sector have made this sector too much successful. Okay, so then localization of industry, very important topic. And last is the geographical features. One is the conventional line UPSC have mentioned, the earthquake, volcanoes and the tsunami. Earthquake, volcano or tsunami. So, you have to study the conventional pattern, their causes, impact and the other aspect. Second is, recently what kind of changes have been seen in the geographical, critical geographical features. So critical geographical features are called the morphologies or the landforms. So mainly changes in the landforms. One is the habitat or the biome. So these are the main centers of wildlife where the important biodiversities are recorded, but through the human activities we are seeing the habitats and biomes are disturbing, they are destroying at the large scale. On the one end, it is ending the wildlife at large scale. On the other end, it is creating the ecological imbalances and finally pushing the human world in future facing the critical problems. Second, the rocks, land, mountains. Rocks, lands and mountains, definitely different changes have been recorded. Rocks now they are running under the rocks bathing, erosions and the landslidings. So these landforms also are making challenges before the human society. Third is the ocean, river, lakes and ponds. These are other kinds of landforms. The oceanic waters, river water and the lakes, we are recording the different changes like the bleachings and loss of ocean biodiversities. And now in the world so many rivers have dries up, and this is making ecological imbalances, and in future the human society may be too much threatens. So we have to save the oceans, rivers and lakes. And now you have to find the what factors are deteriorating the features of oceans, rivers and the other landforms, and in India or at the global level what kind of conferences, consensus have been made to fight these changes, or what kind of studies have been introduced recently for their improvisation. So these are the topics from the geography. And again the geographical features you also must read or cover. The geographical features like the western coast or the eastern coast, what is the difference, how they are important for the Indian economy, western Ghat, eastern Ghat, importance of the Himalayas, importance of the islands, the Lakshadweep or the Andaman Nicobar Islands, the Thar deserts, what is the position of the Thar deserts, the northern plains or geological position of Himalaya, how it have changed in the recently studies. So the geographical features of India must be completed in the different ways. And one more guidance I want to say you or discuss, you regularly should practice to overview the previous year question paper. Through the previous year question paper you can understand each and every aspect of the syllabus and topics, through which you can expand your mental horizontals and you can cover these topics in the different ways. Further, we will provide the holistic approach on the each and every topic. So you may take help from our website Naresh Academy, where we have uploaded too much value added materials for the civil service exam or the other exams. Thank you.